Welcome to On the Rise. I am Evan Murray, and this is awesome. We're here to talk about all the fun facts of Chinese language music. Hey everybody, how's it going? We got Sophie in the house today. She's come all the way down from somewhere in Taipei to join us here in New Taipei City. This place is a undisclosed location. So, Sophie, how you doing? Can you introduce yourself to the audience and let us know what you're up to, who you are, and what you're doing?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, audience. My name is Sophie. My name in Chinese is Jojo. So I have like the same intro that I give every time. It's like, Hi, 大家好，我是 Jojo Sophie. I was born and raised in Montreal, grew up there most of my life, and now I'm in Taipei making music. And I am here to not promote an album because I haven't had released an album.
We're just here to have a conversation.
We're just here to chit chat a little bit.
All right. So the thing is, let's talk about that. So you're from Montreal. I'm from Montreal. And let's talk about Montreal. What is the significance of Montreal? Can you tell people what growing up in Montreal was like?
I think that, when you're French-speaking Canadian, usually within Canada, you're like, oh yeah, I'm from Quebec. And then when you're outside of Canada, that's when you're like, yes, I'm Canadian. Because if you just say like, I'm French Canadian, people are like, oh wait, Canada speaks French? Which is something I thought that the world was aware of, but apparently it's not as known as I thought it was. So yeah, for me, it's a cool thing, I guess, for people to find out that I speak French. Also, it's really fun whenever I go like travel around the world and then like I hear like tourists in French. And then I can actually understand them, and I feel like a like, secret agent or something. So yeah.
About the French part, so that that's kind of an interesting element about Canada because, as people should know, I guess Canada is a bilingual country, and but the thing is, like French is mostly situated. Well, let's say Quebecois French is mostly situated inside of Quebec.
Yeah,
and then you have little communities in like Alberta or Manitoba, these little French communities, they just pop up off the map.
Yeah.
But then you also have like Acadian French in like New Brunswick, right? Yeah. And the thing is, like when I was living out west, and lots of people like move out west to work and do all that stuff, and I didn't know there was a difference between like the Quebecois and the Acadians. And one time this guy was like, I could hear he had a really thick French accent. And I said, oh, what part of Quebec are you from? And he's like, Quebec, I'm not from Quebec. And he got all upset. And I'm like, And then I found out there was this huge like rivalry between the Acadians and the Quebecois.
I wasn't aware of like that much of a big rivalry, I guess, because I meet them within like when they are in Quebec already. So they've already like, they're like in Quebec, so they probably won't go around throwing the middle finger around. Like, I don't know. Can I swear in this show?
Yeah, sure.
I swear like a freaking sailor. So, so if you're listening to the podcast, I really just held my hands, both fists in the air, trying to withhold myself from, showing the middle finger. But yeah, no, it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like the Montreal-Toronto thing. It's like they're both known for being big cities, and so there's a rivalry. So I guess Acadien and Québécois too. It's like you guys are both known, or like they're known for speaking French. So for sure, there's going to be some sort of competition. Yeah. Well,
actually, like where I live right now in Newfoundland, I'm like where I'm situated is that I am like a 30-minute boat ride from two territories owned by France, and they're called Saint Pierre and Miquelon.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of that before?
No.
Yeah. No. So I live in this place called the Burin Peninsula, and part of the treaties, like when the French and the English finally settled down and they created treaties, one of the treaties were for the French to leave the island of Newfoundland and to occupy these two islands, and then the agreement is that they would keep it as France.
Okay.
So like during the summer, we have a lot of people that come through, like from Quebec or like the Acadian French, to just go and see a part of like history, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
Because that's where Al Capone used to smuggle all his booze through, right? Saint Pierre and Miquelon. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Cool.
Yeah. It's really crazy.
Today I learned.
So let's talk about your music a bit. What can you tell me about your music? Like what genre, style you're doing, and albums. How many albums do you have?
So I've released one album, I want to say 6 years ago. It was a flop. I released it.
That's fun.
I mean, it is what it is, like, I know it's not fun. No, it was, I mainly I do pop, but that's such a big umbrella term. Like
Sure.
I like to do stuff that sounds commercial. I like commercial music. I do when I'm obviously in Asia. I do like stuff in Mandarin Chinese, but I also release and I still write in French. So when I moved home for 3 years, I released some stuff as an indie artist, and they were all French music. It's still pop sounding. So yeah, if we're talking about genre, I guess just commercial earworm melodies.
Well, no, that's so interesting because I know like because I carry a Quebec birth certificate, like there's like there's a lot of opportunity, let's say, for Quebec, French speaking people based out of Quebec. If you hold that birth certificate and you have the language, which I don't have the language. But there's a lot of funding opportunity for people out of Quebec. Like that's very,
really?
Yeah,
what
very
do you mean,
much.
Like, what do you mean as, like, you mean as the fact that you're holding a Quebec birth certificate gives you
like this, like, yeah, Quebec kind of operates like when we talk about like funding and like there's federal funding right across Canada, but when it goes into provincial, like Quebec has all these like language protection and culture protection.
Yeah.
So they have like other avenues for funding. Like,
okay, I know what you mean.
So there's like a record label. And maybe like your record label wants to talk to these guys. Indica Records.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, they're based. So Franz Schuler, based out of Montreal, but they, their label is like funded by the Quebec. Like the whole entire arts and stuff by the Quebec.
I did not know that,
yeah.
But I assume so because the market is so small that sometimes when I look at any popular artist, for the listeners, I just did the quote unquote
the butterflies.
Yeah, the butterflies. But no, I like the market is so tiny that there must be aid coming from the government because there's no way you can really just make it, or like, I mean, I guess there is, but
But no, we're going to talk more about that in this conversation because the thing is, like, one thing about Canada is that it doesn't hold the same kind of monetizable value, let's say, that other countries can. Like, generally, for some reason, Canadians, like, they still listen to the radio and they love Facebook, but the thing is that they're not as, like, generally active on platforms like YouTube where, like, artists can gain, they can make money, they can make a living from their, YouTube. And but, it's a hard conversation because, like, 3 of the most streamed artists in the whole world are Canadian, right? Like Justin Bieber and Drake and
the third one?
Maybe it's not. Maybe there's not 3. Maybe I'm just imagining that.
That's already 2.
Yeah, it's already 2.
What's his name? Shawn Mendes, also Canadian.
Shawn Mendes
he must be in the top 100.
And one of the artists is actually going to be at Jade Music Fest is Tyler Shaw.
Okay.
So, and he's Canadian, but he amassed like 4.5 billion hits on TikTok from this thing. But it's weird. Canada's a weird environment because they have these mega stars but the industry itself is kind of unknown, right? So if someone pops off big, they go global, and for Canada's population size compared to the United States, we do quite well, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I can think of so many Canadian artists actually.
Well, one of the weirdest, this is a good piece of information, and like I was touring in India. Like I used to be a musician years ago, and we have this mixed band of like Swedish, Canadian, Indian guys, and we're like sharing like music from our country, right?
Yeah.
So like the guys from Sweden are like ABBA, and like there's so many huge artists that came out of Sweden. And then I'm showing these guys like, oh, have you ever heard of the Tragically Hip? Or like Our Lady Peace or like Tea Party, and these guys are just
I don't know Tea Party.
Oh, okay. See, well, so these guys are just like, I have no idea who this is.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's the first time it ever happened to me where I realized that just because it's big in Canada doesn't mean nothing. Like it like literally the rest of the world might have no idea. So I really felt like, man, is Canada really that, like, we just push everything so in the interior? Yeah.
But I think that's true of most countries, though, because I was watching, Netflix has a really good series called This Is Music, or I don't know, it's like a music documentary, and every episode deals with, like, for one instance is about, like, pop powerhouse Sweden or Stockholm.
Okay.
And then another episode is about Britpop. And I was watching with my Irish friend, and it was just, they were talking about like British acts that were just huge, And like, you know, him being from Ireland, he was like, oh yeah, I remember when this was huge, blah, blah, blah. And there were so many, I was like, I don't know if it's because I was from like, I grew up in Quebec and like I listened to like French music, and I was like, I have never heard of this.
Yeah.
So many artists. But like for him, it was just like, no, this was like the biggest thing. So I think it's kind of like similar where, you know, when you're in that environment and everyone around you is like listening to it, like it's the biggest thing. And then as soon as you step out of it, you're like, oh no, it's tiny.
Yeah, it's like its own cell.
Yeah.
Right. And but let's talk about that for a second. So let's talk about the French, because Quebec did have some huge artists too.
Yeah.
Like they had like
Celine Dion.
Well, of course, yeah. So
my idol.
Is it really?
Oh, I love her. She has this great like kitsch kind of cheesiness to her. But
Right.
Like, I think she's such an accomplished artist that has so much willpower and respect towards her industry and her voice, and there's so much on her that like I think a lot of people like can afford to learn from, like the way like she lost her voice and now she's still one of the greatest vocalists of all times,
right?
But like she comes from like literally just like fucking up her voice entirely, and the discipline that comes into like touring like that and being, you know, like not reliant on dancing and on visuals. Like I think that era of like divas like Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, like they all have that kind of, you know, like they really worked on their instrument. So I think that, I don't know, that respect towards their art, for me, it's something that's like super that's the superstar level, right? Like that's the idol. And you know, like all our idols, I mean, everyone's saying everyone's dying, but we just don't have the mediums anymore. Like we don't have much music, or we don't have MTV to carry these household names, you know. But I think also because the market's so saturated, right? Like you have someone so big on TikTok, like Tyler Shaw. I know of Tyler Shaw just because of the fact that like I listen to pop music, but like, even if I just heard of him on Spotify, like I wouldn't get how big he was.
I never heard of the guy.
Or like Charlie D'Amelio, she's huge on TikTok. Like she has like, I think billions. I don't know. Let's put a pin in that. How many followers she has. But she's absolutely huge, and she's a TikTok star. If you're not on TikTok, you're like, who the fuck is this person? So yeah, you don't have the same. I guess everyone is just.
Well, we're not being told who's famous anymore.
Exactly. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
That's what I realized. I realized like, you know, as I'm getting older now, I'm like, how come I don't know who's famous? And it's like, oh, because when I was younger, I was being told who was famous, right? There was only one music station. There was only
radio station.
Yeah, there was only certain magazines that had, you know, so that was all, you know, demolished with downloading, you know, and then streaming. And now it's like people just have such a varied, you know, taste. Yes. You know what I mean?
And with algorithms, everything catering to your palate.
Exactly. There you go. Yeah. There you go. The algorithm thing, that's a huge difference. And, you know, there's also companies out there now, like there's one in Finland where what happens is like the Europe, you know, I'm not even sure if Finland's even part of the European Union, but... no,
they're part of the...
like the Scandics or...
Yeah, the Scandics.
Bunch of Scandics, but yeah. But what they do is that... So check this out. This is so sick, and I don't mean in a good way, but maybe it's a good way. What they do is they have the writers and producers, and they get all this money put in, and then they'll headhunt people, like, you know, like if they're, you know, visually appealing and if they're good looking, and they can sound good and singing. And what they do is they have a quota to write and release 100 songs a month. So 100 songs gets put out into streaming platforms, okay? And they do this inside of countries like China. They just hit demographics and like when you talk about that, like 100 singles coming out of one place, right? With a group of writers and producers, like what is that doing to the marketplace? Like that's just, I mean, how are independent artists supposed to even survive against that? That's like a tsunami, you know what I mean? It's crazy.
But I heard about how, you know, like in TikTok, like Douyin, like Chinese TikTok, a lot of songs blew up from it. And then I think some companies, they realized that, oh, if a segment of the song gets popular, like that song just blows up. And what they did was, I don't know how many companies do this, but I just, this is what I heard, is that some people will actually just like create those really catchy segments and then release them on TikTok and whatever, or Douyin, and whichever blows up, then they actually
we'll write a song around it.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
So it's insane because it's, I guess it's still an art form. It's just not what we're used to anymore, you know?
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, it's the bit, like it's, I guess the thing is because like it's the propagation, like where people they can make money off the monetization, so they're going to try to. I guess they're going to try to figure that out, right? They're going to say, okay, so what's the quickest pathway between creation and money, right? And I guess it's what you're talking about, which is sad because I mean, where does that leave everybody else? And how do you compete against that? Like that's the thing that I find mysterious, because I think that we have to start thinking about other ways to have music, because I mean music makes money from certain things, right? Like it makes money if it's in a movie, it makes money if it's in a TV show, it makes money if it's in a commercial, it makes money if it's like highly streamed, but that's like, I mean, it seems like music is almost the arm to something else. You know what I mean? Like it's not
the accessory.
It's the accessory, right? Yeah. It's like the soundtrack to a thing that's happening.
But that's actually a really funny thing, because that's what my label and I we always talk about. Like we are oftentimes online. Basically, some trolls will say like, oh, this is such a cheap music video, because of course, like people will listen to a music if there is visuals attached to it.
Sure.
Right? I guess the song "Video Kill the Radio Star" was very much all-knowing,
iconic. Yeah.
But all this to say, it's like at the end of the day, if the music really is good, people will go and listen to it. I think it's more like there is both sides to it, right? Like music can be part of an accessory for other things, but at the same time, like you can think about it the other way, where if someone's watching a movie and then they hear that song and they're like, holy shit, what is this? This is so good. They're going to go and Shazam it. Yeah. And so you could also argue that the vehicle, like the movie, was the accessory for this song. So the same thing with like our music videos. Like we're releasing a visual media so that like today's society can be like, oh, it has a YouTube video, so I will go and click on it. But like at the end of the day, who's going to go ahead and rewatch the music video so many times? If they really like the song, they're going to go on their streaming platform, they're going to go download that song, and they're going to be listening to the song constantly. So it's, I think both sides are true, where music can be someone's accessory if they don't really give a shit and their whole thing that they're selling is the actual TV show or the actual movie or their entire persona.
Well, what I found is like, the first time I really saw this happening was, I think it was with that show, The Sons of Anarchy. And what they would do is like, at the beginning of the show, they have this like feature song where the story starts, becoming. Of course, there'd be like interludes of music, but then at the end, they would play like a full song as well. And it almost become like theatrical where, the song would be attached to the story. And then what they started doing is releasing these Sons of Anarchy albums, you know what I mean? And then I was like, oh, or like the playlist and that kind of things. So the thing is like, then it becomes an inside deal as well with the TV show or the movie or whatever, is that they are like, they start marketing, and I guess there must be some kind of partnership there. That's all the licensing and distribution. But it's like a movie or a commercial or a show or like these ads, they become like their own little... They become like their own little like cell inside of a marketplace. You know what I mean? Where this song exists. So that's it's definitely different. It's definitely a different world. But going back to Celine Dion, there's something interesting here, because there's a little bit of a connection. So
don't tell me you're related to her. Oh my god.
No, my buddy Jeff Bova though produced her one of her Grammy-winning albums. Okay. So he was her producer, and then he also produced Jolene Tsai here. Okay. I think her song was called Red Dress or something like that. He co-wrote it and produced it. But when we talk about Celine Dion and her iconicness, let's say, right, is like there was also, because I kind of want to focus on this a little bit. Do you think that she carried like the French language in Canada around the world, or the French of Canada around the world? Do you think she kind of took that with her?
I think so. I think she was very, very proud of her heritage. And if we hear like a low rumble right now, that's my stomach rumbling. I realized as I said that it just went, all this to say, no, I think she was like, she's definitely very proud of her heritage, and she kept on putting out French albums simultaneously. And like she worked really hard to get rid of her accent when singing, but like when you listen to her talk, God, she talks like like a
talking like this, like you.
She's like, "Hey, my name is Céline Dion, and I'm from Quebec." Like she really does talk like that. Yeah. So I think the fact that she was unabashedly just proud of her heritage, like made the entire world also be like, oh, okay, cool. So I don't think it was like her being like, oh my God, I have to promote this, but it was just her being like,
her.
Yeah. She's so quirky and weird.
So how many languages do you speak?
Sober 3. Drunk, as many as you want. I'm kidding. No, my Spanish gets like decent when I'm drunk.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the other language that you speak. So obviously you speak English because we're speaking.
Yes.
And then obviously you speak Quebecois, French, Francais. And then you speak
Mandarin Chinese.
Mandarin Chinese. Yes. So did you grow up speaking that at home with your parents?
So my parents are from Sichuan in China, so they speak a dialect which I understand, but I can't speak it at all. Like I just like my cousins make fun of me constantly. They're like, "Please stop. This is awful."
Really?
Yeah. My sister and I, we speak French between each other, but like me and my parents, we would speak Mandarin to each other. Okay. So they were really adamant about me not losing the ability of speaking, at least.
Yeah.
And like, you know, a lot of my friends that were from the same background as me, you know, like first or second generation of immigrants, they kind of just gave up on like learning how to write or read. Okay. And my parents were like very adamant on like, you know, at least know the basics. So I'm pretty grateful for that, because now I write songs in Chinese, and that requires a certain level of knowledge.
Well, we got some Taiwan background music going on here, so no, it's okay. We can let that roll. We'll let that roll because it just identifies where we are. I think
Absolutely.
When you hear the garbage truck singing Beethoven, right?
This is unfortunately not the ice cream truck.
Yeah. This is the garbage truck.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's it, folks. Please continue to listen to the next parts or continue to the next episode. Please don't forget to hit subscribe and follow On the Rise. This is awesome.